It started as an ordinary evening. The dining table was set, candles flickered gently, and laughter echoed through the house. My husband and I had invited a few close friends over for dinner, nothing out of the ordinary, just good food, great company, and casual conversation. Everyone seemed relaxed, enjoying the ambiance and the wine, as plates of delicious dishes passed around the table. It was the kind of evening you'd expect to end with warm goodbyes and promises to do it again soon. But that night, things took a turn I never saw coming. As the evening progressed, the conversation shifted from light-hearted banter to a more mischievous tone. My husband, usually calm and composed, leaned forward with a sly smile. "How about we play a little game?" he said, glancing at his friends, who exchanged knowing looks and chuckles. I was intrigued but also slightly hesitant. The way they seemed to anticipate this moment felt oddly rehearsed, like it wasn't the first time they'd done something like this. Curiosity got the better of me, and I watched as they began explaining the rules. It sounded harmless at first, a mix of dares and truths, meant to spark laughter and reveal playful secrets. But as the game unfolded, it became clear this wasn't just any game. The questions grew bolder, and the dares teetered on the edge of uncomfortable. My husband's confidence and the way his friends fed off each other's energy started to unsettle me. It felt like I was witnessing a side of them I had never seen before, a side they kept hidden behind their usual charm. I could feel my heart racing, torn between laughing it off and standing up to question what was happening. But then, something happened that silenced the room. A question was asked, a question so bold, so out of place, that it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The tension was palpable as everyone turned to me, waiting to see what I would do next. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a game anymore. It was something much bigger, something that would change everything. The room was eerily quiet. My husband sat across from me, his expression unreadable. His friends, who moments ago were laughing and egging each other on, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. All eyes were on me, waiting. I couldn't understand why this particular question, of all things, had caused such a stir. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they were delivered, the tone that carried something deeper, something unsaid. I glanced around the table, trying to gauge the atmosphere. My husband's best friend, Mark, avoided eye contact, staring into his glass like he could find answers in the swirling wine. Sarah, the usually bubbly one of the group, suddenly looked tense, her smile frozen and unnatural. Even Lisa, who was always ready with a sharp comeback, seemed lost for words. It was as if everyone knew something I didn't, something they weren't ready to share. I wanted to brush it off, to laugh and move on like nothing had happened, but the weight of the moment wouldn't let me. "What's going on?" I finally asked, my voice cutting through the silence. "Why is this such a big deal?" No one responded right away. My husband leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. He had a habit of doing that when he was nervous, and it only made my unease grow. "It's just a game," he said eventually, but his words felt hollow, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. A game. That's all it was supposed to be. But games are supposed to be fun, lighthearted, not this, whatever this was. As I sat there, piecing together the fragments of the evening, memories started bubbling up. Moments I hadn't paid much attention to before. Little jokes between my husband and his friends that seemed innocent at the time, but now felt layered with hidden meanings. Conversations that trailed off whenever I walked into the room. And the way my husband had insisted on hosting tonight, even though he usually preferred staying in the background at gatherings like these. The feeling in my gut told me this wasn't random. Whatever was happening, it had been building for some time. And now, I was right in the middle of it, unsure if I was meant to be part of the joke or the punchline. The silence was unbearable. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I might have missed. Everyone's reactions told me this wasn't just about the game anymore. It was about something bigger, something I wasn't supposed to know. Mark finally broke the silence, his voice shaky. "Maybe we should call it a night," he said, avoiding my gaze. But Sarah shot him a sharp look, one that seemed to say, "Don't you dare." It was like watching an unspoken argument unfold right in front of me. I glanced at my husband, hoping for some sort of explanation, but he just stared down at his hands, avoiding the tension building around us. "What's going on here?" I asked again, this time more firmly. My voice carried a weight that surprised even me. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." For a moment, I thought no one would answer. Then Sarah, usually so quick with her words, spoke up in a low voice. "You weren't supposed to be part of this." Her words hit me like a cold wave, chilling and confusing all at once. What did she mean by that? Part of what? I looked around the table again, searching their faces for clues. Lisa avoided my gaze. Mark looked downright guilty. And Sarah? Sarah looked almost regretful, as if she wished she could take back what she'd just said. My husband, though, was the hardest to read. He sat there, silent and still, his jaw tight like he was holding something back. "Why wasn't I supposed to be part of this?" I pressed, my voice shaking now. "What is going on?" No one answered, but the tension in the room thickened. It was Mark who cracked first. "Look, it's not what you think," he said quickly, his words stumbling over each other. "We were just messing around. It wasn't supposed to get this serious." "Messing around?" I repeated, disbelief dripping from my tone. "You all look like you've seen a ghost, and you expect me to believe this is just harmless fun?" The weight of their silence was deafening. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, knowing the ground could give way at any moment. My husband finally looked up, meeting my eyes, and in that moment, I knew whatever he was about to say would change everything. My husband's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time that evening, he looked vulnerable. It was unsettling to see him like that. The man I thought I knew inside and out suddenly seemed like a stranger. "It's not what you think," he began softly, echoing Mark's words. But there was a tremor in his voice that made it hard to believe him. "Then tell me," I said, my voice firm despite the growing knot in my stomach, "because right now it feels like everyone at this table is keeping something from me." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Lisa finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." Her words hung in the air, vague and heavy, adding another layer of confusion. "It was just supposed to be a way to clear the air?" "Clear the air?" I repeated, glancing between them. "What does that even mean?" Mark let out a sigh and ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "Look, this whole thing started as a joke," he admitted, "but it turned into something else." He trailed off and my patience snapped. "Something else? Can someone please just say what's going on?" My voice cracked, a mixture of anger and fear bubbling to the surface. I didn't know what I was more terrified of, that they'd tell me the truth or that they wouldn't. My husband took a deep breath and leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together on the table. "It's about trust," he said, his voice steady now, but his eyes still avoided mine. The game was supposed to test trust between all of us. I blinked, confused. Test trust? How? By asking inappropriate questions and making people uncomfortable? "It's more than that," Sarah interjected, her voice firmer now. "There are things that have been unspoken for too long. We thought this would be a way to bring them out into the open." The words felt like they were circling around something, never quite landing. I tried to piece it together, but it didn't make sense. What unspoken things? And why did it feel like they all knew something I didn't? As I sat there, my mind racing, my husband finally met my gaze. "There's something you need to know," he said quietly, his words laced with tension. "But I don't know how to tell you." The room felt suffocating as my husband's words lingered in the air. His hesitation, the way he avoided my gaze, made my pulse quicken. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "Then just say it," I urged, my voice trembling. "Whatever it is, just tell me." His friends exchanged uneasy glances, and I could feel the tension between them growing. It was clear they all knew what he was about to say, but no one wanted to be the one to speak first. Finally, Sarah broke the silence, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Maybe it's better if you hear it from us," she said, looking at my husband, almost as if asking for permission. He shook his head, his jaw tight. "Number, it has to come from me." The weight of his words sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't imagine what he was about to reveal, but the way they were all acting, it felt like my entire world was about to shift. "Just tell me," I said again, this time more firmly. He took a deep breath, his eyes locked on mine. "This isn't just about the game. It's about something that happened a few months ago," he began, his voice low and steady. "Something I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." My heart pounded in my chest as he continued. "That night I said I was working late. I wasn't at the office." I froze, the implications of his words hitting me like a wave. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Before he could respond, Mark interjected, his voice sharp. "This isn't the way we planned to do this." He turned to my husband. "Just be honest with her. She deserves that much." The word planned made my stomach twist. What exactly had they planned, and why did it involve all of them? My husband's silence was deafening, and it only made the anxiety bubbling inside me worse. "I wasn't at the office because I was with them," he finally admitted, gesturing toward his friends. "We've been working on something personal." "Personal?" I repeated, my mind scrambling to keep up. "What could be so personal that you couldn't tell me about it?" Lisa shifted in her seat, her face pale. "It wasn't supposed to come out like this," she said quietly. "But this is bigger than any of us. It's about protecting you." Protecting me? The words sounded absurd, considering the way they'd all been acting. "Protecting me from what?" I demanded, my voice rising. My husband's expression was a mix of guilt and determination. "There's something about my past, something I've been keeping from you," he said, his voice breaking. "And I thought I could handle it on my own, but it's starting to catch up to me, and I couldn't keep it from you anymore." The room fell silent again, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. But before I could process what he'd said, Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling. "It's not just about him. We're all involved because it's coming for all of us now." Those words sent a chill down my spine. Whatever this was, it was far bigger than I could have imagined, and it was clear that the truth, whatever it was, had only just begun to unravel. My heart raced as I tried to piece together my husband's words. I could feel the air thick with secrets, things I wasn't ready to hear, but couldn't avoid anymore. "What exactly are you saying?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. My voice cracked, and I didn't know if I wanted to hear the answer or not. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together on the table. "I've been keeping something from you," he repeated, his eyes pleading for understanding. "It's not just the game. It's my past, something I thought was buried." The room seemed to close in around us as he continued. A few months ago, I got involved with a group. They've been pressuring me. I didn't want you to know because I didn't want you to worry. But now things have escalated, and I have no choice but to tell you. I could feel the blood draining from my face. What group? What have you gotten yourself into? Before he could respond, Sarah spoke up again. It's a cult, she said, her voice shaking. And it's been pulling us all in, one by one. We thought we could leave, but they don't let you go that easily. The word cult echoed in my mind, and for a moment, everything went still. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, the man I trusted, had been involved in something like this, and I had no idea. It started innocently, my husband said, his voice quiet. A few meetings here and there. But the more we got involved, the more they controlled us. They wanted us to sever ties with anyone who wasn't in the group. That's why I lied to you about working late. I couldn't tell you the truth without putting you at risk. I stared at him, trying to process everything. I felt betrayed, hurt, but there was also a part of me that wanted to understand. How could he get involved in something like this without telling me? Then, just when I thought I could grasp it all, Mark stood up abruptly, his face pale. There's more, he said in a frantic voice. They know you're here, and they know we've been talking about this. The tension in the room hit a breaking point. What does that mean? I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Mark's eyes widened. It means they're coming. They'll stop at nothing to make sure you don't get away from them. The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. My husband's face drained of color. They're here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but the sound of the doorbell was unmistakable. Everything I thought I knew was about to unravel in ways I never could have imagined. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, and it felt like the world had frozen around me. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at my husband, his face ashen, his eyes wide with fear. What do we do? I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Mark, then Sarah, then Lisa, like he was trying to decide whether they should run or face whatever was on the other side of the door. But they all looked just as terrified as he did. We have to go, my husband finally said, his voice shaking. They can't find us here, not now. But before we could even move, the door creaked open and a figure stepped into the room. Tall, dark, and silent, the stranger's presence seemed to fill the entire space. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there, his cold eyes scanning the room. It took a moment for any of us to speak. Finally, I broke the silence. Who are you? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing fear in my gut. The man's gaze shifted to me, then to my husband. We're here to collect what's ours, he said calmly, his voice low and emotionless. I felt a wave of nausea rise in me, but I refused to back down. What do you want with us? I asked, struggling to keep my voice from trembling. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at my husband. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences, he said, his tone almost pitying. Before I could process his words, the stranger turned and nodded to someone behind him. A second figure entered the room, this one holding a small box. My husband looked like he was about to say something, but whatever it was died on his lips. With one final glance, the man who had spoken stepped back toward the door. This is only the beginning, he said. There's no turning back now. And with that, they were gone, leaving a thick, suffocating silence in their wake. I stood there, unable to move, the weight of everything crashing down on me. My husband finally stepped toward me, his face filled with regret. I never meant for it to get this far, he said quietly. I just wanted to protect you. From what? I whispered, my voice barely a sound. He sighed, looking away. From the truth, from the darkness that's been following us. In that moment, I realized there was no easy way out of this. The game, the secrets, the lies, they had all been leading to this point. And now we would have to face whatever came next, together. As we stood there in the quiet aftermath, I understood that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we're least prepared to face, and as for what came after that night, I couldn't say for sure, but I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again.